Let's discuss this more now with Evan Bernstein. He's New York Regional Director for the Anti-Defamation League. Evan, thank you for talking to us. This is terrible what we've been seeing. This is just one of many attacks. There was an attack on Jewish New Yorkers almost every day last week. What do you think is behind this?
You know, there's still a lot of questions. The fact that is that the Jewish community right now is being targeted. Just the last 2.5 weeks, you know, we had the Jersey City shooting and murder that took place there, and then the unbelievable spate of attacks that took place in Brooklyn last week, and then now during the holiday of Hanukkah, the stabbing that took place in the ceremony and in the party that was taking place in the rabbi's home. In Monsey, it has been an absolutely unbelievably difficult time for the Orthodox community here in the New York, New Jersey region, and it is something that has to stop. The community cannot continue to deal with these kinds of attacks on what seems to be almost a daily basis.
And so, I mean, you just heard Bryn's report that the perpetrator lived about a half hour away, so clearly seemed to go out of his way to target this area. And for people who aren't familiar, this is Rockland County. This is one of the largest per capita populations of Orthodox Jews in the country. You've actually been to the scene there. You mentioned a little bit about how the community is doing. They can't continue. This is obviously not sustainable. They're living in fear. Tell us about what you're hearing from them.
So I got to the scene on Saturday night about 11 o'clock, and I stayed until 6 o'clock the next morning, working with law enforcement and talking with community members. And the common theme that I heard from community members in the Monsey area around that synagogue is the enormous fear that they have for their children. They really feel like their lives are being completely affected in how they can worship, how safe they feel. There's a lot of interconnectors between the Monsey community and the Brooklyn Jewish community. A lot of the family members have families in both communities. So when something happens in Brooklyn, it also deeply affects what happens in Monsey and Rockland and vice versa. So when these things were happening the week before, it certainly was affecting the community in Monsey. So then to have that attack take place, people are just terrified. I mean, they really are afraid to walk to synagogue. They're afraid to be able to practice in the way that they want to. A lot of people left the Brooklyn community for safety reasons. They wanted to go to a more suburban area, a more safe lifestyle, which they felt was, in Monsey, and that has now been shattered for a lot of these people. And it's so disconcerting and so sad for this community that they're having to go through this. And people want to celebrate Hanukkah, and they want to celebrate Hanukkah, and there's been so many victims over the Hanukkah, this past Hanukkah, that so many now will never be able to celebrate Hanukkah in the same way, and that is real tragedy.
And I know that you talk about social media. How do you see social media playing a role in this?
Social media is a place right now where people are getting really activated and learning how to hate. And we've seen that, unfortunately, in Pittsburgh, in Poway, even Jersey City, and we're going to learn more now as we hear about the hate crime charges taken against this individual in Monsey in the writings, and we'll see whether or not he was maybe activated online. So many people now are getting their hate online. It's a place where you can go onto chat rooms and get information and get activated and get radicalized. And you can have lone individuals that are not necessarily affiliated with any one large group, but get as radicalized as they want to be, and hear from people that give affirmation to their thoughts on these blog and chat rooms, and they put things out there and they get affirmed, and they feel that this has become normal and okay for them to think this way, and then unfortunately you see people acting out. Clearly we don't know enough yet about what happened in Monsey, and we're waiting to see what law enforcement finds.
Speaking of radicalization, I mean, that's something, when you're talking about terrorism and sort of lone actors, that's something we talk about. You've heard New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo vowing to propose a law that would make New York State the first to treat these kinds of incidents as domestic terrorism. Let's listen to what he said.
But we have to change the laws to call this what it is. This is terrorism. It is domestic terrorism. These are people who intend to create mass harm, mass violence, generate fear based on race, color, creed. That is the definition of terrorism.
Would it change anything to label it as this? I'm curious what your view is on defining this as domestic terrorism.
Yeah, I think as long as law enforcement agencies understand that, and it can certainly amplify what charges and potentially what kind of conviction and sentencing would happen, I think it's important. You know, we saw the same thing in Jersey City, where the Attorney General of New Jersey and Governor Murphy supported it being called an act of domestic terror in Jersey City during that shooting. So I think it's important that states now start looking at these things, because these are terrorist acts. These are things that are terrorizing our community. Just because it's on domestic soil, on American soil, does not make it any less of a terrorist act, in our opinion. And I think it's important now that law enforcement and elected officials are looking at it in that way.
Evan, thank you so much. We really appreciate you talking to us. Evan Bernstein with the Anti-Defamation League.
Thank you.